You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
Is your AppSec program actually reducing risk? Developers and AppSec teams drown in critical alerts, yet 95% of fixes don't reduce real risk. Why? Traditional tools use generic prioritization and lack the ability to filter real threats from noise. High-impact threats slip through and surface in production, costing 10 times more to fix. Ox Security helps you focus on the 5% of issues that truly matter before they reach the cloud. Find out what risks deserve your attention in 2025. Download the Application Security Benchmark from Ox Security.
Today is April 1st, 2025. No foolin'. I'm Maria Varmazes, and this is T-Minus.
T-Minus. 20 seconds to LOS. T-Dress. Go for deploy. Roger roll.
The FAA has closed 2 mishap investigations into January 16th launches of SpaceX's Starship and Blue Origin's New Glenn.
4.
Sierra Space has successfully demonstrated resilient GPS technology for the U.S. Space Force.
3.
GITAI Japan has been contracted by JAXA to conduct a concept study for a robotic arm system intended for use on a pressurized crewed lunar rover.
2.
The European Space Agency has released its annual Space Environment Report.
1.
SpaceX successfully launched Fram-2 to polar orbit.
0.
And our guest today is Gary Gilbert. And Gary authored a book called Spacegirl 2, 21 Women Write About Their Careers on Earth in the Space Industry. And his book funds scholarships at the International Space University, and he'll be telling us more about that later in the show. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Let's get into today's Intel briefing. Last night, the SpaceX Fram-2 mission lifted off from Florida. It was a little touch and go for a while, with the weather at the Cape being what it was, but thankfully the Falcon 9 transporting the 4-person crew in a Dragon capsule took off without a hitch. Fram-2 is the first ever crewed mission in polar orbit. It's carrying a cryptocurrency billionaire and 3 guests on a days-long trip that will orbit directly above Earth's north and south poles. Malta resident Chun Wong, who made his fortune running Bitcoin mining operations, paid SpaceX an undisclosed sum of money for this trip. Joining him are a trio of other polar exploration enthusiasts: Norwegian film director Jannik Mikkelsen, Germany-based robotics researcher Rabea Roga, who is Germany's first woman in space, by the way, and Australian adventurer Eric Phillips. It was an unusual launch from Florida, heading southward to reach its orbital path. The mission will last somewhere between 3 to 5 days before returning to splashdown off the coast of California. Then it's hoped that the Framinauts, as they've been nicknamed, will be able to exit the capsule without medical assistance as part of their research into long-term human space travel. We're looking forward to seeing the results of this mission as they're shared in the coming days. The European Space Agency opened the 9th edition of the ESA Space Debris Conference today. The event coincides with the space agency releasing its annual Space Environment Report. The results don't shed any new light on the subject, but do reinforce the issue that space debris is an increasing problem in low Earth orbit. The report states that within certainly heavily populated altitude bands, the density of active objects is now the same order of magnitude as space debris. Wow. ESA says the adherence to space debris mitigation standards is not enough to stop the increase of the number and amount of space debris. The report calls for more active debris removal in LEO, something we believe we will be seeing more of in the coming years. And did you know that intact satellites or rocket bodies are now re-entering the Earth's atmosphere on average more than 3 times a day? Wow. Yeah, let's hope we don't see more debris raining down on Earth in the years to come. GITAI Japan has been awarded a contract by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, to conduct a concept study for a robotic arm system intended for use on a pressurized crewed lunar rover. This rover is part of Japan's contribution to the Artemis program and is designed to enable long-duration human exploration of the moon's polar regions. The study will aim to define the design and specifications for a robotic arm system capable of supporting lunar science operations primarily during uncrewed periods, while also providing support during crewed missions when needed. The arm will be tasked with performing a range of mission-critical operations, including regolith excavation, rock and soil sample collection, unloading, handling and installation of large payloads such as scientific instruments and observation equipment. It'll also enable science activities through both remote and autonomous control capabilities. These functions are expected to significantly expand the scope and duration of lunar surface research. Sierra Space has successfully demonstrated resilient GPS technology for the U.S. Space Force. Sierra Space worked in collaboration with General Dynamics Mission Systems to achieve all GPS navigation signals required for the resilient GPS mission. The technology targets the increased need for more resilient GPS systems that protect the United States against adversarial threats like jamming and spoofing of the current GPS infrastructure. This demo is part of the Quick Start R GPS contract awarded in 2024 by the USSF Space Systems Command to develop design concepts for smaller, more affordable GPS satellites. And the Federal Aviation Administration has closed 2 mishap reports. The first one was into the SpaceX Starship Flight 7 mishap on January 16th and states that there were no public injuries and 1 confirmed report of minor vehicle damage in the Turks and Caicos Islands. The FAA oversaw and accepted the findings of the SpaceX-led investigation. The final mishap report cites the probable root cause for the loss of the Starship vehicle was stronger than anticipated vibrations during the flight, which led to increased stress on and failure of the hardware in the propulsion system. SpaceX identified 11 corrective actions to prevent a reoccurrence of the event. The FAA verified that SpaceX implemented corrective actions prior to Flight 8. And the FAA is overseeing the SpaceX-led investigation of the Starship Flight 8 mishap that occurred later on March 6th. That investigation remains open. A return to flight of the Starship vehicle is based on public safety. SpaceX may not launch Starship again until the FAA accepts the final mishap investigation report or makes a return-to-flight determination and all other licensing requirements are met. The second mishap investigation just closed was into the Blue Origin New Glenn 1 mishap that also occurred on January 16th. It was a busy day in space, if you remember. The FAA oversaw and accepted the findings of the Blue Origin-led investigation. The final mishap report identified the proximate cause of the mishap as an inability of the New Glenn's first stage to restart the engines, preventing a re-entry burn from occurring and resulting in the loss of the stage. Blue Origin identified 7 corrective actions to prevent reoccurrence of the event. The FAA will verify that Blue Origin implements corrective actions prior to the launch of the New Glenn 2 mission. And that wraps up today's top 5 stories from the space industry. Now we have N2K senior producer Alice Carruth with the stories that we're also keeping an eye on. Alice?
Thanks, Maria. We have a slurry of business news that we're keeping an eye on. MDA Space has announced its intention to acquire Israeli company SatixFy Communications. Karman Space and Defense, Cider Space and Spire Global have all shared financial updates. And we couldn't go without mentioning the Crew 9 interviews that were shared yesterday. They were never abandoned, folks. Let's put that story to bed now, shall we?
Absolutely, yes, please. And a reminder that links to all of the stories that Alice has mentioned can be found in the selected reading section of our show notes.
And on our website, space.n2k.com, just click on this episode title.
Hey T-Minus crew, if you are just joining us, be sure to follow T-Minus Space Daily in your favorite podcast app. Also, do us a favor, share the intel with your friends and coworkers. Here's a little challenge for you. By Friday, please show 3 friends or coworkers this podcast. A growing audience is the most important thing for us, and we would love your help as part of the T-Minus crew. If you find T-Minus useful, please share so other professionals like you can find the show. Thank you so much, everybody. It means a lot to me and all of us here at T-Minus.
Are you frustrated with cyber risk scores backed by mysterious data, zero context, and cloudy reasoning? Typical cyber ratings are ineffective, and the true risk story is begging to be told. It's time to cut the BS. Black Kite believes in seeing the full picture with more than a score, one where companies have complete clarity in their third-party cyber risk using reliable, quantitative data. Make better decisions. Reduce your uncertainty. Trust Black Kite.
Today's guest is Gary Gilbert, and we met Gary at SpaceCom earlier this year in Florida when he approached us to ask if he could talk about his book on our show. And the book he pitched is raising money to pay for scholarships at ISU, specifically for women, and we could hardly say no to that now, could we? So I asked Gary to tell us a little more about himself and how he got involved in the space industry.
I went to the International Space University in 2011, graduated in 2012, and I made friends with one of the women there, and we were able to go to a field trip for a week or so into Russia and see their space program because one of the professors was actually Russian. The lady that I became
fascinating.
Oh, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I've actually been closer to the actual stuff in the Russian one compared to the U.S. one. There was a lady that couldn't go because, she had, scholarships and had money, but didn't have, enough extra money to go on this trip. And I'm like, there should be a scholarship to help out, situations like that, because that was once in a lifetime thing,
Yeah, and those trips can be very expensive. Yeah, yep, I get it. Yeah, I want to kind of put a pin in you visiting the Russian space program because I would love to hear more about that too. But we'll get to that later because I want to make sure we talk about your book and what is in it. Can you tell me a bit about some of the stories that can be found in there?
Well, actually, there's several stories. One of them, Sharon, she's the suit technician.
Mm-hmm.
She's one of the she's the suit technician that helped Mae Jemison, who was the first female black astronaut.
Yep.
And she was there to get her suited up. And she tells about how she got into it and how life-changing that was. Other ladies have run, different organizations, Space Foundation, stuff like that. Shelley Brunswick, she's one of the ladies, and she's got a new book out called "What's Space Got to Do with It," and it's an awesome book. It's actually got me more and more focused. But like I said, it's just 21 women who I thought I reached out to via Facebook and LinkedIn and just said, hey, I'm trying to put this book together. We're going to use it here to fund a scholarship. And 21 women, gave me their stories.
That's amazing.
There's a few that are here, nearby within an hour or so of me.
Mm-hmm. And you're in Florida?
I'm in Florida. I'm like 6 miles from the Cape.
Nice.
So it's really nice. But yeah. I've talked to a couple of them, and it's just, they're great women, and I felt that their story should be told. I don't know if you know this, but there's been over the last few years, there's been a post on Facebook where Jack Black, the actor, his mother actually worked on the Apollo program.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
And that always blows my mind when I see that.
Yeah, I mean, and from what, it was saying, there's, she, left work, went and gave birth, and a couple of days later came back and helped solve some of the stuff that needed to be solved for the Apollo program, and it just, to me, I had this idea, and then I read about and saw the movie Hidden Figures, and I'm just trying to get more and more, like I said, girls into STEM. You know, a couple of the ladies I reached out to, but they, because of their, for whatever reason, they weren't able to contribute their story. But, is the current KSC director, who's now NASA administrator until the, Trump's appointee gets put into office. I guess you could say it's a passion project. So
I really admire also that you are focusing on the kinds of roles that are less, they're not as well known publicly, but they're so important. And they're also, they're not the astronaut path, which I think understandably we all celebrate astronauts, of course, because they're extraordinary people, but most of us cannot be an astronaut. But, the work, the incredible teamwork that goes on to make these space missions happen, there are a lot of careers in there that are viable that a lot of kids, a lot of adults don't even understand that those careers are there and that there's a path into them. And I think it's wonderful that you're focusing especially on that, because these are much more achievable than becoming an astronaut. Not to, squash anyone's dreams, but and also not everyone wants to be an astronaut.
Yeah. Well, one of the ladies is actually quality assurance, and you can look at quality assurance, is that pretty much any facility, because you always want to make sure that your product works, but when you're sitting there making sure that the quality control is top notch, you don't want a say, for example, a satellite or a rocket ship to mess up because something wasn't tightened down at exactly the right amount of torque.
Absolutely.
Yep. I don't know, but several years back, and I'd say at least 10 to 15, a multi-million-dollar satellite fell over its stand because it wasn't tightened down tight enough,
Mm-hmm.
and someone didn't do their job or didn't do it well enough, and so everybody, especially when you're looking at a rocket or a satellite that goes up into space, it's got to be the best.
Absolutely. Yeah, these jobs all matter. Everyone's role is extremely important, and they may not be as public, but they all are extraordinarily important, and they require a lot of expertise. I think it's really noteworthy that you're highlighting that. So I love that, and I think that also makes your book very unique. So I think it's fantastic that you've put this together, and also for such a fantastic cause to support students at ISU. I think that's just really wonderful.
The book came out in October, so there weren't that many sales, and it only made a small amount of money, which I'm in the process of getting to the school for last year. Hopefully this year. My goal is to have it in every 6th to 12th grade school in the United States within a couple of years, and overseas. Several of these ladies are from various countries. There's one in New Zealand. There's a couple in Italy, one in Germany.
When you were sourcing the people to speak to, were these students at ISU, or how did you find these women?
Well, some I actually had some connections at ISU.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And they recommended some people. I also looked at Facebook and LinkedIn persons, if it had anything to do with space in their profile, or they worked a certain place, I reached out to them via messages, cold calling, so to speak.
Wow. Yeah.
Some of them came back and said, no, I'm not interested. Others said, yeah, what do you need? And, I asked for 12 to 1,500 words in your own words. What's your story? And like I said, 21 women came back and gave me their stories.
That's amazing. Well, I love that you used your network and also did some gumshoe work. I really like that. That is not easy to do those kinds of cold outreach, but I'm glad that you did it, because I'm sure it yielded some fantastic stories, Gary. So that's really cool. That's great. Gary, while I've got you here, I'm also very curious, just anecdotally, to hear about your trip to Russia. I have to admit, that's just personally fascinating also. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, the main thing, though, is, like I said, we got to go I guess you could say the centrifuge, where they test, going around in a circle. I actually got to go and be, maybe 25, 30 feet from it,
Oh, wow.
Whereas there were other places at the engineering that had some parts of what was going to be, or what had been, one of their spaceships, one of their rockets. And they were trying, we got to see and actually touch it, you know what I'm saying? And just, I for whatever reason, never worked that close to the rockets and stuff.
That must have been really incredible. What a unique opportunity at a unique point in time.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Let me just say this. Seeing Red Square in person was awesome. I mean, everything I had been told growing up, about a foreign country, Russia, was not exactly as I'd been told, if you understand what I'm saying.
We'll be right back.
Looking for a career where innovation meets impact? Vanguard's technology team is shaping the future of financial services by solving complex challenges with cutting-edge solutions. Whether you're passionate about AI, cybersecurity, or cloud computing, Vanguard offers a dynamic and collaborative environment where your ideas drive change. With career growth opportunities and a focus on work-life balance, you'll have the flexibility to thrive both professionally and personally. Explore open cybersecurity and technology roles today at vanguardjobs.com.
Welcome back. The crew on the International Space Station are certainly always very busy. But of course, everyone's got to let their hair down now and then. Even if being in low G has your hair sticking straight up, metaphorically, you all know what I mean. Now, if I asked you to guess who was one of the biggest ISS pranksters of all the crew who've been aboard, would you also have guessed Chris Hadfield? Because, yeah, I certainly would have as well. Now, he posted an image of himself looking skeptically at a little green alien friend sitting in his hands on April Fool's Day 2013, saying that a UFO had docked to the station. Ha ha. And actually, 2013, that was a good year for April Fool's Day pranks from Hadfield. Gotta hand it to him. Earlier that same day, he also posted an image of himself holding what looked to be 2 grenades. And actually, they were air grab sample bottles. But honestly, these grenade-like sample bottles do look awfully similar to the thing in which one shalt take out the holy pin, then shalt thou count to 3, no more, no less. 3 shall be the number thou shalt count, and the number of the counting shall be 3. One has to wonder who exactly Hadfield thought was naughty, and who should, to quote Monty Python, snuff it. We may never know. But if you're thinking, Maria, of all of those pranks, they pale in comparison to the most amazing ISS prank ever, and that would be Tim Peake being chased around by Scott Kelly in a gorilla suit, with Kelly springing out of a floating box like a Jack-in-the-Box kid's toy. I regret to inform you that that was, in fact, not an April Fool's Day prank. It was on February 24th, 2016. Aw, sadly, doesn't technically count, but perhaps it can be an honorary April Fool's Day prank in all of our hearts. And that's it for T-Minus for April 1st, 2025, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like T-Minus are part of the daily routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K's senior producer is Alice Carruth. Our producer is Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I am your host, Maria Varmazes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hey everybody, Dave here. Have you ever wondered where your personal information is lurking online? Like many of you, I was concerned about my data being sold by data brokers. So I decided to try Delete Me. I have to say, Delete Me is a game changer. Within days of signing up, they started removing my personal information from hundreds of data brokers. I finally have peace of mind knowing my data privacy is protected. Delete Me's team does all the work for you with detailed reports, so you know exactly what's been done. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/N2K and use promo code N2K at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/N2K and enter code N2K at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/N2K, code N2K.